we need to be honest about the question, what do you do for a living? The knife cuts both ways, doesn't it? It can go well or it can not, depending on why it's being asked. It's often used as a way to size someone up, right? The question assumes to answer all kinds of questions like, what's your work ethic? How educated are you? What's your political affiliation? What class did you come from and are you currently a part of? And how powerful are you? All of this in a possibly innocent gesture of interest. And there are many reasons to feel awkward about answering this question. Are you between jobs? Do you have a low-paying job? Does your work not pay money at all? I even understand people of the highest level of education, highest class, highest income, and highest levels of power in our church wanting to just go about their lives in our church community and not have to deal with people who are unable to separate their profession from who they are as people. Because even though what we do for money is telling about who we are as people, it is not all of us. When I first came to the church, I was asked this question a lot. And I really struggled with how to answer it because it was, and it still is, a pretty complicated thing for me personally to answer. And you'll see why shortly. When people ask the question, they're looking for a quick answer. Doctor, lawyer, whatever. They decide if they want to know after the initial response, and then it goes from there. One time, someone asked me this question here at church during social hour. I responded, I work at Stewart's, how about you? Instead of answering the question, they asked another question. Stewart's the gas station? I said, yeah, I work at the one in Philly. The change that happened on this person's face was immediate and obvious. Before they knew where I worked, they were comfortable. After they found out where I worked, they were not. They let out that they worked a very well-paid, prestigious, white-collar job. I tried to move the conversation into something that would relax them a bit, but it didn't work. And so I politely said goodbye. That really was effectively goodbye, because though this person is still an active member of the church, they have never spoken to me since. All that mattered was my profession, and it clearly defined me in their eyes. I'm hoping that they will change their mind. As rough as that experience is to share, I am overjoyed to also share that this was the exception. Many times, that question, what do you do for a living, was asked as a genuine gesture of interest in me as a whole person. And I'm glad that they asked me, because from that little question, that icebreaker, my family and I have been invited into people's homes to break bread and share conversations, even after they learned that I was a clerk at a gas station. Those meals are some of my fondest memories. Some produce grown from their gardens, some milk and meat and cheese from their animals, some made entirely from bought food, all lovingly prepared into meals that fed the bodies and hearts of everyone around the table. I don't work at the gas station anymore, and if you talk to me for more than about 10 minutes, you'll know why. It was a means to an end. My wife and I, who we are as people, we are back to the landers. We were city people. Like the Unitarian transcendentalists of the early 19th century and the counterculture of the 1960s and 70s, we are idealistic young people who left the city in hopes of making the world a better place through community building, farming, and direct production of things that we consume. We were going to do this with meager savings and our blood, sweat, and tears. We built our house with just the two of us. The only time that we have running water is when we're pouring it from a pitcher. And we harvest our own firewood to heat our home and cook all winter. We definitely have had to become Jack and Jill of all trades. A couple minor setbacks. There's no proper farmland where we live. But through community, friends have been made of it. Farmland has been made available to us, and we've developed friendships. Soon we'll be moving to a place with actual tillable land, and the whole not having running water thing, it will be a thing of the past. Sure, we're a long ways off from producing all of our own food, but we've come a long way from the gardenless Florida suburbs from which we came. Also, I don't know if you know this, but you can't pay your taxes with blood, sweat, and tears. There are quite a few other expenses that require cash, especially when you have children like we do. Henry David Thoreau, who was baptized and raised as a Unitarian, was a master wordsmith who painted a beautiful life with his words that lived in my mind for many years and is a big part of why I chose this life. His time at Walden Pond was portrayed as a bucolic paradise with 2.5 acres of beans as well as other plots of potatoes, turnips, and peas. He built his own house, made his own bread. He happened to leave out that this must not have actually been enough to sustain him, maybe, because his mother regularly fed him, as well as doing his laundry. He would go to town for dinner parties and would have people from town come out to the home that he built for dinner parties at the pond. He would earn money to pay expenses by working as a handyman, using other people's tools. Maybe he needed the material support, or maybe his rugged independence came with a feeling of isolation that could only be smoothed by the balm of family and community. I don't share this to undermine his insights, but rather to highlight the reality that the simple life is not simple or free. It is also certainly not a solitary venture. It is also worth noting that Mr. Thoreau never planned to pay those taxes. When asked to pay, he refused, stating his opposition to the Mexican-American War and slavery, and he was jailed until someone, they think it was his aunt, paid those taxes to release him from jail against his wishes. So, what I'm trying to say is that we've had to change plans. We're still back to the landers, but instead of using hand tools to build our house, we use power tools. Instead of a crosscut saw and a splitting maul to process our firewood, we use a chainsaw and a wood splitter. Instead of a horse that pulls a wagon and a plow, we have a truck, and I walk behind a rototiller. That's okay with us. We kind of saw it coming based on how these experiments have played out in the past. And I have to give credit to Mr. Thoreau because you can tell from our reading that I read from before I started my sermon, that he alludes to this. For him, it was not about putting in the work. For him, it was about putting in the work and making an honest effort so that in the end, he would not have any regret that he didn't try. Even when it meant taking time to go to town and take the odd jobs as a handyman to try to make it work, it was all a part of the larger goal. And I definitely see myself and my family in this. His next excursion was working to pay off his debts. The handyman thing didn't quite pay all the bills. Maybe if I had read this with a more critical eye, I would have been able to see through his beautiful poetry. Like Mr. Thoreau, we have worked money jobs and are getting better at growing produce that we sell at market. The money work that we do is a part of our family aspirations. We don't look at it as in, oh no, we've sold out. Not that kind of way, but more of a, this is just what it takes to continue on this path. Because for us, it isn't an all or nothing proposition. This is not a zero-sum game. And for people who think that cash jobs are soulless, I can assure you that they are not. Shelby's position here as the Assistant Director of Religious Education has contributed much more than money to the betterment of our family, and for that we are truly grateful. Now, what about the work that isn't for money? The work that can't be weighed and measured? What do you say that you do for a living then? How valuable is that work? I like to think of this work as making a life and not necessarily a living. It's not really as odd as it sounds. It's around us every single day. There are people around us, invaluable members of our community, who do not participate in money work at all. You see this in people who are homemakers, people who are retirees, people who are providing home care for loved ones. The work of these people is priceless. The unfortunate truth is that many of these people do not receive the respect and appreciation they deserve for what they provide for their families, as well as our community. This is one of the most fundamental flaws of a society anchored in the division of labor. This idea that everyone must be a specialist to be of worth, and when they aren't, well, maybe we'll tolerate them. This attitude is wholly incompatible with our first two principles, as well as the third, depending on context. Inherent worth and dignity of every person, whether they are homeless or the head of operations. Justice, equality, and compassion in human relations, whether you are a child or an adult. This is non-negotiable. You don't need to make 1 red cent. You don't need to have ever made 1 red cent to deserve respect and community. And I think this is why Henry David Thoreau came to town to share meals with people that he cared about. He recognized that community is wealth beyond measure, and a meal is a simple gesture of that idea. There is something about sitting down to a meal that was prepared with care and shared with no strings attached. A feeling of being on equal terms. Michael Pollan, put this eloquently when he wrote, "Cooking has the power to transform more than plants and animals. Cooking, I found, gives us the opportunity so rare in modern life to work directly in support and in the support of the people that we feed. In the calculus of economics, doing so may not always be the most efficient use of an amateur cook's time. It is beautiful, even so. For is there any practice less selfish, any labor less alienated, any time less wasted than preparing something delicious and nourishing for the people that you love?" If you need to put down the mask of power and prestige, if you aren't being treated with respect because of the money that you don't make or do make, if you want to simply share a conversation, maybe a meal, depending on how we are with COVID, I want you to know that I am here for that. Come and find me. If we've only briefly met, and I think, and you think that I don't remember you or whatever, don't worry about it. Come and find me. Ask me what I do for a living. Again, ask me again. This is how communities get better. This is how communities get stronger. One conversation and one meal at a time.